Welcome everyone to another Beyond Bitcoin BitShares Hangout. This is the 28th Hangout, and today is Friday, July 7th, 2017. We call these open source Hangouts from now on because, let's face it, we are an open source community that works with open source technology, and we have to always be adapting and able to change. And we have to also be in a place where we can let people know what's going on with ourselves, with what we think about the community that we care about and that we have helped grow and build for years. And we also want to enable people who have work and skills that they would like to put into the chain to be able to start doing so. So what I've done is I use whale shares and Beyond Bits to reward the people who join here with worker proposals for the BitShares chain and talk about the various things that are going on that need fixed and changed within the BitShares chain, and maybe some flashy things, maybe not so flashy things, but things that are extremely vital to the ecosystem that we care about and we're trying to grow. So with that said, we have the ability to pass out hundreds of dollars of tokens every week to people who join up here who might have otherwise seen the barriers to putting up workers in the BitShares ecosystem as a little bit too hindering. So we offer not only publication of your work, not only recognition of your work and a platform where you can be recognized, but we offer you a pool of people who are very interested in this technology, who have their own levels of experience and their own spheres of influence, who can actually help you if you prove that you're doing something of great value. And in addition, we can pay you. So there's no reason to no longer use these services. I urge you all to reach out to those people who you think would bring value to the BitShares ecosystem and continue telling people about us, because this is how we push forward into the future, and this is how we empower one another. So with that said, we have a few people who are joining up to this week. And they're going to be talking about some specific issues. I'm going to be one of them, but I will go in the order of the posts as we have them in the RSVP thread, which is on steemit.com. Today, Ash wanted us to talk. He's not going to be here, but that's Fav for a lot of people who are not familiar with who Ash is. Asks us to avoid about avoiding dangerous feed errors in the case of the Bitcoin network's plans to fork or potential forks in Bitcoin, and asks if we're going to hold BitBTC prior to the 1st of August. I'm going to talk about a little bit of an update on our worker proposal for the CoinMarketCap campaign and the BitShares is hiring form, and we'll talk a little bit more about that before we put that in this week. And I'll give you some updates, and maybe we can talk a little bit about your thoughts on it. And then we're going to move on to Steem, CM Steem, who's going to be bringing up a few of the BSIPs that he's writing. He's doing he's very busy writing BSIPs lately, if people have been noticing. And he's kind of a community all-star, so he's been supported highly by myself, and I'm very happy to see what he's doing in the space because of it. So thank you, CM Steem. He's going to be talking a little bit about that. Talkinator is another person who's a kind of a BitShares hero, and he's doing a lot of stuff with BSIPs and talking about the worker proposals behind the scenes. He is going to be talking about the revival of Black Swan events and potential BSIPs for that. And he's also going to give you some good news that he brought up and actually posted to our RSVP thread about the core maintenance worker proposal that we talked about last week. So look forward to him giving us a little bit more of an update on that. And with that said, there's going to be one final one, which is never mind. That's going to be it for the week. But for this hangout, I would like to see if we can start off, try to keep these each about 5 to 10 minutes each, and then we can open up for anything that we would like to talk about any of these projects afterward. So the first point on our agenda is to talk about feed errors in the case of a Bitcoin fork, because as we were all talking a little bit right before we started recording, this is kind of a big deal coming up with potential Bitcoin forks over the argument and the discussion of whether transactions can be scaled by increasing block size in the Bitcoin network, and whether they can be scaled to the level that Bitcoin needs them to scale to. There are a couple dissenting opinions within this group, but there's also something very important the BitShares community itself has to consider with this, which is the price feeds for Bitcoin and making sure which ones they are going to decide and how we're going to deal with this. Because whenever Bitcoin forks, that means that there will be Bitcoin, and then there's going to be another Bitcoin, and it might have a new name. I'm not sure if this is the one that I'm thinking that with Roger Ver, but maybe you guys can give some updates. But this is one of the things that can split a community, like what happened with Ethereum. And the goal is to have such wonderful self-governance and localized self-governance that the chains can actually handle these things and come to consensus on what they're going to do instead of splitting and fracturing into another chain. So with that said, who wants to talk about this? Does anybody have any opinions on the? Obviously, people have opinions. So, who wants to bring up what they were talking about before we started recording? Joey D or CM, do you guys want to talk a little bit about this?
Well, I think our opinions of which is better is kind of off topic. I think what we should really be focusing on is potentially halting the BitBTC over the period of uncertainty. What's the new name going to be for the two different forks, if there is going to be two different forks? Because there is quite a big split community within Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I don't disagree with you. I actually agree with you 100%. That's where I think that the governance of BitShares comes in and what we have to do, right? But you guys do seem to know quite a bit about it, or that you guys were talking about what's going on with it. Is this what I'm thinking with Bitcoin Unlimited? Because Bitcoin Unlimited was essentially a new chain that was created. It's not a fork per se, but it essentially is.
Yeah. From my brief understanding, I believe it's a case of big blocks versus small blocks, and small blocks including, the SegWit implementation through they're proposing, a user-activated soft fork, instead of going for the hash rate implementation where, over 51% or whatever the trigger rate is, determines the new rule. So whether or not it's going to go into effect, if there's going to be two new coins created, what exchanges are going to support the new coin versus the old coin, that'll put uncertainty into the price feeds. So, around price feeds, we have to be careful because, it can cause this quote unquote black swan event, which is really a global settlement, which there is currently no recovery from. There are proposals, proposed BitShares improvement proposals to reverse this irrecoverable state. But at the moment, that is not implemented. So, taking preemptive preventative measures is, I think, a good idea for sure.
I heard a podcast by Trace Mayer, who was discussing the fact that no matter where you keep your BTC, if whatever wallet you use for that, if you don't prepare for this user fork that is possible, then exchanges should be doing this as well. But one of the questions I have is, where are the safe havens? Now, you could get out of BTC altogether, which probably is a smart thing to consider doing in this time of uncertainty. But the question I have is, what wallets would support both approaches as a hedge if you don't know which way it's going to happen? I think maybe a better approach is to get out of it altogether, but I'm interested to hearing other people's opinions about this.
But in terms of what we should be doing with BitShares, does anybody have any thoughts regarding that? Because this is really what's going to happen is BitBTC. Okay, for those who aren't familiar, BitBTC tracks the value of Bitcoin in a decentralized fashion on BitShares DEX. It's one of the shining gems of the BitShares DEX. Now, the question is BitBTC going to be encountering a black swan because of this? Is that something that we have to like? This is something that we've uncovered. CM Steam actually helped us uncover a long time ago. And this is a big question for me, and I think that we need to kind of stick on that
I agree. I think that's a good point. Sticking with the BitShares focus is a good idea. And on that point, I mean, are our price feeds going to be supporting both different segments of the potential fork if it happens?
So my thoughts on this is here's what I'm thinking at the moment. First, we would need to, the witnesses, I suppose, who are providing the feeds, would need to identify, I think, which feed to follow. And that way, once they do so, if they do so, then they can continue producing a feed for what we consider to be BitBTC. However, I think if there's ambiguity, possibly what the witnesses should do is to stop publishing. And that, I think, would kind of freeze the price feed markets and I think would prevent the borrowing of new BitBTC for the amount of time that the feed is not being produced, which might be a day or two. And just to follow up that thought quickly, if there is a fork and a second coin, that I think would merit its own separate coin, either a new MPA or perhaps something else. So I wonder what other people think about that.
I think that's a good idea for sure.
100%. I think I agree with the idea of making a second token once we know what it becomes.
One issue though is the time period, because the fork is not a single moment. It takes at least one difficulty adjustment period, and for the slowest that could take months.
So what do people think? Is there, for example, should witnesses be alert at this time and then talking among themselves as to which feed they believe to be most representative, or maybe with the highest volume of BTC activity, or 52%, 51% or greater activity?
What if we opened up a market that was supposed to be representing the new chain, and we can't do that until we know the dang name of it.
Yeah, there is that issue. But even if we knew that, there is the question of how do we properly reflect the dominant, quote unquote, old chain?
I would say that the free market could do that. If we have two options and you choose one or the other, as long as you know which one it is. But that's the question: is how do we do that until we know? We might come up with a bit asset that's called Bitcoin 2, or Bitcoin Unlimited, or whatever you want to call it, and then they call it something completely different, and now we have this bit asset there that doesn't represent that. Yeah, Bitcoin unknown. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, and is there a way of moving over, like, hey, if you guys hold these tokens, we're going to give you this new token that tracks it, and it's the right name. Like, share dropping might be another potential way of, kind of maybe not jerry-rigging it, but using the tools that we do have to build something that works. Thoughts?
That would be possible with user-issued assets, but with market-pegged assets, you'd have to then provide collateral, and in order to distribute that token and stuff. So I'm not sure.
So yeah.
So I think maybe to follow up on Fave's concern, or Ash's concern, is I think it would make sense to encourage each and every witness for them to post how they propose to handle it, the price feed, whether in terms of to abstain for some amount of time, or just say that they will be looking out and trying to identify which is the dominant price, and then produce that. So perhaps we could encourage witnesses to come out so that they're thinking about that.
That's a great idea. Crowdsourcing is the best, in my opinion.
I mean, because ultimately, really, with our system, it's the witnesses that are determining what is true. So I think they should be coming out and saying how they will proceed to it. So I guess maybe if you know any witnesses, and we know one here, to come out and to disclose how they intend to proceed.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Tom, you're a witness. What are your thoughts on it?
Give me just a second.
Sure.
Just sitting down with a cup of coffee. My thoughts on it are, I'm waiting to see what other witnesses are wanting to do at this stage. I actually haven't written my own feed script. I'm using BTS tools, which Wako, who was another witness, has written. But if he is unprepared to address this, then I'm going to jump in with both feet and figure out what needs to be done in the code. I think I can manage that. But at this point, that's about as much thought as I've put into it so far.
Okay, and does anybody have a date on the proposed fork?
Well, it was August, I believe. I mean, this user-issued fork thingy, and I don't even fully understand how it's user-issued myself. But the point is it's in August from the podcast that I heard Trace Mayer speaking about it. It's I think August 17th, or it's in August at some point.
I mean, could this be something where we could use the BitShares, some of the worker proposal collateral, or something like, I mean, as collateral, and kind of unwind positions for people, and when we know, we open up both markets and unwind it. I don't know how much exactly. I would have to find out the stats on how much in terms of BitBTC is traded, but I know that it's not the biggest volume asset that we have. It's definitely, it's not as big as BitUSD or BitCNY. So maybe it would be worth it because of all the potential fear that could drop our price just because of the anticipation of us not knowing what to do with it, to kind of steady the market and say, hey guys, worst case scenario, we unwind all of this and take the hit on it as a chain, and then come through this and split it off, and and learn our lessons to find a better way. Now, I still agree with Tom, with you, Taco. Like, we should ask the witnesses, but I definitely think there are opportunities for us to potentially use some of what we have available to at least these are potential options,
Once the alternative, the potential fork is identified, where we could actually determine who's going to be using the alternative fork, and then watching for opportunities to obtain prices that are going to be quoting. The minimum that we could do is publish an alternate feed for that source.
Sorry, Tenda, I missed your point. With that alternate feed, would that be feeding the current BitBTC or potentially second BTC?
I would say it'd be a second BTC, because we already have established the sources and et cetera for the current BTC. So this would be a new feed for whatever new thing emerges for this alternate user-issued fork segment, whether that happens or not. But we should be prepared to do that, I think, as witnesses.
Sure. And then I think on the chain side, I think I personally would have to review how do we handle the creation of a new MPA that is issued by the committee, possibly. So that would be a question for the committee, I suppose. Like, does the committee want to stand behind and create a new market pegged asset that they issue?
Well, that's a good point. But even before then, we would have to have the price feed to support that MPA. So I think the price feed is certainly a priority in that first.
Yes, that's equal part. So I think at the moment, I know certainly one thing that I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to reach out both to post a notice out to witnesses about asking them to post how they intend to proceed, because that's one thing. Because possibly those who don't address this at all possibly should not be witnesses during this time if they're not addressing how they're going to handle this situation. And then a second thing is also maybe just to reach out to the committee and see what they are thinking about this as well.
I think it's also worth, as a community, individually peer reviewing the proposed BSIPs for, reviving market pegged assets after the global settlement period. That way we get closer to a solution in case the worst happens,
Oh yeah, definitely. So is that a segue? Or maybe is that has lower rank right now to segue to that topic?
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
So Casamino, do you want to talk about this, or shall I?
You can, totally. It's not my BSIP. I was just mentioning it as like something we should do,
Okay. And so it's also not mine, but I think it's also very important. So the idea is, and it's been out there for a while, which is how do you revive an asset that has black swaned? And specifically, this has currently in the past affected Bit Ruble, I believe the Swedish kroner, a prior incarnation of Gridcoin. And hypothetically, it could affect other assets such as, maybe BitBTC or something else. And right now, at the moment, once an asset black swans, it is more or less stagnant and can't. That market is more or less dead. And so there are proposals as to how to revive them, and specifically, if I remember, they are BSIP 17 and 18, and they will take. I think they both have very good descriptions about how to proceed, and they will take some amount of time to develop. But considering that they will take some time to develop, and it's not a crazy amount of work, but there is work behind it to make sure that it works well. I think it's something that efforts should begin to be developed so that that the community is not sitting around when possibly a new, more prominent asset gets black swanned, and then we have to try to start from zero. I think it would be good to have something ready, or at least in development, for any such situation.
Is it possible to test any proposed solution on the testnet? I think this would be a difficult thing to test without a lot of participation, maybe simulations, but I'd like Xerox to comment on that if he's got his ears on here.
I'm here. Are we talking about the settlement stuff, or are we talking about the Bitcoin splitting right now?
We're talking about the settlement stuff and how we handle black swan events.
Well, the settlement stuff will be tested on the testnet first, and you can do that. You can force settlements or black swans on the test network quite easily. Excuse me.
Right, and specifically Xerox, perhaps it was ambiguous. We're talking right now about reviving black swans and whether we could do it on testnet, which I think we can, but I'm curious your thinking.
Not just a matter of restarting the trade when everything goes down.
Well,
yeah,
but it also involves a settlement, right? I mean, are those two separate things? Just restarting the trade as one and doing the settlement as the other?
Yes. There was I don't remember the details, but one is restart, and then the other one is what to do with the assets that were locked up. How to possibly make whole certain people. Oh, so is Xerox back? So Xerox, yeah. So the question was, could we possibly use the testnet to test the functionality of reviving black swanned assets per BSIP 17 and 18?
Yeah, that's exactly what the testnet is good for. That's also a reason why I had this bounty for updating the testnet source code to be more compatible with the BitShares source code, because otherwise I would have needed to do that anyways to make it easier for proposed hard forks or proposed added code to BitShares to be compatible with the stuff that happens on the testnet. So yeah, I'm already kind of preparing towards these kind of things. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So this would be, I was unfamiliar with this. So are you talking about a prerequisite for using the testnet for the black swanning revival?
That's a decision the shareholders need to make. What they require of new code, what needs to be done for new code to enter or to be approved by the BitShares blockchain and do a hard fork. I personally require that code that hard forks BitShares is first introduced to the testnet, but that's just my personal approval strategy, basically.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it makes perfectly good sense. We need to have some kind of process in place. So I think that's in my opinion, that's a minimum as well.
Test environments are the standard. Probably should stick to the standard.
Unless you're Bitmain.
Okay, Joey, calm down, buddy. Calm down. Back to this. So Xerox, you're saying we could test all this stuff out on the testnet. There are some ideas that you already are working on. Do you guys think that we can leave this for and maybe pick it up next week and move on since we're about halfway through?
Yeah, probably. And the black swanning revival is going to take time, but I think this discussion is useful, has been useful.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, before I move on, I just want to say one quick thing. I think one thing that we need to not overlook is that we have a lot of worker funds. And if we can even use those as saying, we are going to have it as insurance for anything bad that does happen, this bolsters confidence in people outside of our network. So they can say, oh, they are at least going to handle whatever happens. And in this way, we might be able to just kind of, keep the fear and FUD at a minimum and actually work on the solution, knowing that we have that something like that to fall back on if we ever need it. And that, confidence is a very important thing, right? But
Definitely.
Just something that if you guys are out talking to witnesses, maybe to consider and bring in too. I don't know if that's what you guys agree with philosophically. So with that said, is there anything that I've missed or that Talkinator or any of the speakers have missed that anybody would like to mention before we move on?
I would like to mention one more thing. In the case, there is a code proposition for resolving black swan events that obviously requires a hard fork. I would like to make the witnesses aware that it is part of their job to participate in code review and testing and auditing the proposed patch that introduces these new features. So that is because they are, in contrast to the proxies and the committee account, they are paid for actually running the actual code and coordinate a hard fork. So we've had a lot of, we've had quite some time without any hard fork, so there wasn't much to do for the witnesses for quite some time, and I have a feeling that this will change. I'm not sure. It could happen that there's a hard fork this year that introduces some code. At least that's what I'm hoping for and working towards. But I'd like to make the witnesses aware that they will have to participate more actively when it comes to hard forking stuff than they are currently doing.
One thing on that point is that we need to make sure that this is when something is identified that needs to go out as a hard fork, that there's plenty of advance notice so the people that are in China, for example, are aware of it and can respond as well. Because there's we have the witness alert channel, and of course, I think that should be utilized for announcing any potential upcoming release that embodies the hard fork. So I'm just saying that we need to make sure that we are broadly announcing this to the world so that people will be aware.
Yeah, and I just want to second that concern about witnesses reviewing it, because this is essential for security, because it also prevents any intentional or unintentional introduction of security holes by developers. So we need those extra set of eyes, because the witnesses are actually running the system, so they need to be able to check that.
So what I'm getting is we need to really reach out to witnesses, get them on board and talking about this stuff heavily. I mentioned something in the witness telegram. Don't ask me how I snuck in there. I do what I've got to do to try to get things done. But I definitely think that it's an important thing that we get the witnesses on board. And I agree that we give them a place where they can discuss this, and heck, maybe we can have a witness meeting or something and pay them. I don't care. This is so important. And I'm glad that Ash brought it up. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and ask CM Steam, would you like to cover, or Custom Miner, would you like to cover any of the BSIPs that you might not have mentioned already?
The ones I've written, you mean, or the ones that other people have?
Yeah, because, well, you have a couple posts here with BSIP. One is a main post, but you were actually in here showing people a bunch of BSIPs. So any of them that you would like, because what I'm learning is that you are able to dig into the BSIPs a lot now. So I guess it's best for me to just say what you think is the most important, because I see a bunch of them. I could run off the list, but who am I to say which ones are the most important? You're the best one to probably tell me.
Well, like in terms of BSIPs that aren't mine that I think are the most important, definitely the global recovery of settlement stuff for the MPAs. But my BSIPs that I've written up. So I've been kind of going through what I think would be cool for the BitShares network, trying to follow the example BSIP formatting. I need to go through a couple of the previous I wrote because I didn't quite follow them correctly. But so I previously wrote up reintroducing profit sharing or dividends to BitShares for market pegged assets. It originally included user-issued assets, split that into a separate BSIP. So there's a BSIP 19 is for market-pegged asset dividends. BSIP 20 is for user-issued asset dividends. So it's quite different from the market-pegged asset ones. But BSIP 19 and 20 both referenced a coinage statistic that a couple of users in Steemit were concerned didn't exist. So I wrote up BSIP 21, which was introducing the coinage statistic to BitShares assets, for large scale querying for the dividends mechanism. So rather than just taking a static snapshot and dividend at the moment of the scheduled dividend, that we would take into account the how long you've been holding the coins for. So say we were doing a monthly issuance. Yeah, if we were doing a monthly issuance of against BitUSD, it wouldn't just be for the people who were holding it at the immediate moment of the share drop. It would be like, have you been holding it for the entire month? Basically, you'd be rewarded for the fees collected on the days you held the bit assets. You'd be rewarded those fees, or a chunk of those fees, effectively. That way we introduce stability to a certain degree. Around the day of the share drop, because in the past, we've experienced people buying immediately beforehand before share scheduled share drops, and then selling immediately afterwards. And Pure Plays had the large window with the random secret share drop dates, so that it didn't affect the price of BitShares itself.
Yeah.
So it's worth reading these. But another BSIP I wrote up was BSCP 22. This was introducing expiring votes for witnesses, committee members within the BitShares network. So this is basically an elaboration or an extension of Dan Larimer's BSIP number 5. So previously, the BSCP 5 was not well received because it was quite brief. It was just basically kind of TLDR of like what he thought would be a good idea, and some users complained that it wasn't in sufficient amount of detail. So I went through it, cut back a lot of the there's a lot of big words and stuff that I was like, having to Google what this stuff meant. So I kind of simplified it, but then expanded on, the rationale, like why we should be doing it, in my opinion, how we could go about implementing it, like a linear decay rate of, vote. So basically the idea is that the committee would be able to set a max age on votes for witnesses, the committee votes, and for proxies, and after that max age, it would start decaying at a rate specified by the committee. So that rate of decay could be over the course of like months or years, government elections are every 4 years. I don't think it's irrational to say that every 4 years we should have a general cleanup of votes, because, one of the main concerns is that, yeah, exactly. You don't take past votes in an election into account, but also, we've got the problem of votes right now are permanent, and we don't account for the very real fact that people die, and their votes will be permanent otherwise. Likewise, people lose their keys and stuff. But it's a very big topic, a very quite heated, controversial topic to a certain degree, because a lot of people like having their votes permanent. So I'd appreciate a peer review of these. They're all very much so in a draft phase, and just kind of being it's just inspiration to a certain degree,
Well, I won't lie. I've got everything that you do comes to my email box. So I've been reading as you've been posting things. Now, does anybody have anything before I speak up? Because I have a couple things about both the expiring votes and the dividends that I would like to say. But before I do, feel free to speak up if anybody else has.
With regard to the coinage thing, is it a matter of just extending the API? There's some. I think I commented on your BSIP on this, or somewhere I have, about the nature of what appears in the wallet. I think it's under the vesting page of the wallet, but somewhere there is a coinage type of thing surfaced in the UI in the wallet. So there's got to be something in the back end that provides that information.
Yeah, after you posted that, I did have a look, and in the vesting balance place, basically where you can reclaim your fees, there is basically some coinage statistics. So it is interesting that it's taken into account there. So it should be accessible to a certain degree, but it's just a matter of, calculating coinage for each small chunk of assets that have come in for basically each transaction for an entire asset, for like the thousands of users holding it. So it's like on a larger scale calculation. But
is this on a per coin basis or a per asset basis?
Well, the idea is that for market pegged assets, it would be for an individual coin basis, but for user issued assets, it'd be cool if you were doing an initial distribution through this mechanism, that you could select, all right, I want to distribute X% against BitUSD, Y% against, OBITS holders or something like that, and, make your own crazy share drop or something like that.
Okay, I'm going to just say real quick, because we're getting deep into this one, What are your thoughts? Because prior to this, we discussed the idea, and for those of you who, I'm sure actually most of you were here during the very early days during BitShares 1.0 when we were talking about this. And one of the concerns for adding dividends, and I think it's a justified concern, especially to bit asset, is that by doing that, you add a premium to the value of that bit asset, which makes people who are wanting to short it get upset and feel like the system is gamed against them, right? So we had some problems historically with this type of stuff very early on because of that premium that can come on board from that. And we got rid of 5% a long time ago in terms of that. Now, I don't see it as a problem for UIAs. Actually, I think that that's a great idea for UIAs because you're not trying to peg to the value of anything. You're actually trying to have everything be at a premium, right? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I wonder whether I know this has been debated and I haven't given it a lot of thought, but what if actually the dividend is actually going to the shorter and not the holder?
Well, then go ahead.
Yeah, well, I addressed this kind of topic in a couple of these relevant BSIPs 19 and 20. The reason why we removed socialized yield from the upgrade from 0.9x to 2.0 was because of yield harvesting. Basically, I think it was the case that shorters could trigger the payment to themselves at will. So, and the justification of removing, the reissuance of fees to the holders was that, it wasn't that much of an economic incentive, but it was one of our main, marketing ploys at the moment, or at that point. Not ploy is probably not a good term, but
earn 5% on anything was a hell of a marketing.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it was the case at that point in time that I could earn more interest on my fiat holdings on the BitShares network than I could in my local banks, and that's still the case. They're offering like less than 1% interest, which is just garbage. Why would I hold my money in a bank there?
One thing,
Got it. Yeah, thank you.
One thing for sure is that if you have an asset like the Hero or anything else that appreciates, that is expected to appreciate in value, of course that's going to be against the shorters. The shorters want things to go down in value to make a gain. So obviously it's going to be against people that have a short position. So I don't think that's necessarily a very good argument if you're going to create an asset that's expected to be appreciating.
Well, that also applies to like the Hero token.
Exactly right.
But
now there was another alternative for the Hero token where there was I think it was you, Custom Miner, that proposed, or somebody proposed an alternative to the Hero token, which was for the shorters.
Yeah, the Nemesis token, it was the opposite. It was like it depreciates 5% every year. So rather than incentivizing holding, it incentivized selling, But then also came up with the idea of an oscillating kind of price feed so that you would have both buying and selling phases.
Exactly. So those are good approaches to handle the issues that people like saying that the shorters are being shortchanged on this. Just create another asset that addresses that. I thought the algorithmic approach of having a cycle was a great idea. I mean, that's perfect for traders.
Thanks. But in terms of going back to the idea of incentivizing market making, we could totally do that if we were to extract the filled orders on specific, market trading pairs, basically the most liquid trading pairs we could do it for, and issue a share drop against the participants, and proportional to the amount that was traded and stuff. But that's not something that you can currently do in the client. I could potentially write up a BSIP, but I think it'd be more appropriate to create like an external script that could like scrape the entire blockchain for that kind of data.
Well, I remember the yield harvesting. I remember that as another reason that was, a big reason. That was a big drama back in that time. I still find myself kind of curious how that would work. I still see it as being something that giving 5% is a great thing, but if you look at stuff like Steam dollars, if you're trying to hold a peg, that's a bad thing. And people can use that to say BitShares decentralized market pegged assets, the peg is broken. Yes, these assets are worth extra, but is that a good thing if you're trying to, maybe it is. I'm not sure. It's something that I definitely think is worth talking about. The expiring votes, I personally like that. I also would like to piggyback on that if you're okay with it, and just ask you guys, what do you think about how Steam does it? Let's be honest. Like, you lock away your funds for X amount of time, and especially right now when BitShares has all this volume. If we incentivized people to lock away their funds for a specific period of time, kind of like Steam does, in order to have your voting power, that might be a very valuable thing to utilize as well. You guys think about that?
Certainly, that's kind of where coinage comes into the picture with the dividends mechanism. So, like, if you were to do it for user-issued assets, you could specify a coinage time period of a year or something, so that users that held for a full year were receiving
you get more voting power.
Drop. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, yes. Okay. Sorry, man. That's great.
Yeah, this
point,
is really
great
valuable.
Point.
The coinage discussion, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about how it would affect voting power in the BitShares ecosystem, because it's quite a bit different structure from voting in the Steam ecosystem. So that, I think, would be a much bigger change to make in the BitShares ecosystem with regard to affecting the voting power you have.
Yeah, if you were able to vote with market pegged assets, that would be really cool, because currently it reduces, when BitShares are locked up as collateral, you can't then vote with those BitShares, so they're removed from the voting pool, which could potentially be a security risk. But I mean, if BitShares goes massively up in value, perhaps you'll need to lock up less BitShares. I'm not sure,
This is something definitely I like that you're planting this seed though with the coinages. That's a very good thing for us to look at and potentially utilize. Obviously, you guys can see there's a lot we can do with it. Sorry, go ahead.
Just to quickly follow up, Xerox highlights here that the BTS and collateral are still used for voting, and that the shorter votes with them. So they're still voting with that collateral.
I think what he's saying though is that if you put it into bit assets, which is kind of like, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but that you actually get more voting power for doing that, since it's so important to our ecosystem.
Not currently. I don't think that's what Xerox is saying.
No, I mean,
right.
I was talking to CM Steam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't take it into kind of like voting power. I guess if you were, getting rewarded for locking up your coins, then the new BitShares you were receiving would be an increase in voting power. But I've not proposed a multiplier to your voting power based on collateral. That's an interesting idea, though.
Well, I just think with the current amount of volume on BitShares, that would be some pretty powerful stuff to be able to get people to lock away their BitShares. It would probably make it so BitShares could go up pretty quickly. But I think it's very cool, and it's very interesting for us to talk about it and think about it. Does anybody else have any thoughts on these matters before we move on?
I just posted a question. This is somewhat related to voting, but do we blacklist any of the centralized exchange accounts? And if not, why don't we?
Great question. You should have asked that on the RSVP thread, so we can pay you for that.
Well, I included this in my expiring votes. BSIP. I think one concern could be that if we were to enable the blacklisting of accounts, that you could blacklist accounts that weren't voting for you and stay in power, kind of thing. But I'm not sure if this is actually a thing or not.
Yeah, that there is a risk there.
We do have whitelist and blacklist built in as an infrastructure, so I guess I'm very unfamiliar with it, so I really can't speak out of any firm knowledge about it. But I know that if the features exist, I don't really know how they're used and how they're controlled.
It's an interesting question and one to bring up, especially when we have different exchanges that like to say that they're having issues with BitShares markets because BitShares is failing. Things like that are, it kind of, you have this free market, but at the same time you go, wow, these people are intentionally lying about things. So
but if they can't actually get access to their keys, then maybe it's not an issue.
Yeah, well, maybe.
Just joking.
Oh, maybe. Okay, so anybody else have any thoughts on this, or can we move on real quick? I just want to finish off a couple things. Actually, before we do though, Talkinator, do you had that update that you wanted to give about the core maintenance worker?
Sure. Just before we we run out of time, I did want to I was really happy to see that Alfredo's worker proposal for as a maintenance worker of BitShares Core, and actually other things besides BitShares Core, seems to have been approved and will begin working next week. So I'm happy to see that we have a worker back.
Awesome. Yep. It's good to see that we're starting to get some of these basic things that are absolutely necessary done. I know that there's the refund worker, which is always a good thing to have going, and it's pretty much always been running. But real quick, before we end this, I do want to give a quick update on a worker proposal that I am preparing. And we have a user interface, Talkinator. I showed you guys all the interface last week for the form. Talkinator has given a couple updates on what he would like to see added to it. I gave a couple updates to what I would like to have added to it. I'll talk to mine, and I'll let you, Talkinator, talk to the ones that you wanted to see added. But for me, I wanted to see milestones added to it. They're going to work on that. I'm going to ask them if they can. Oh, I already have, and they're building a database where we can track the referrals that come in. And what I'm planning on doing, this is a little bit bigger than what I had earlier planned, but I think that it's important that we try to get some data from this experience. Hold on a second. That we get some data from this. The data that we receive is going to be just as important as anything else. And what I mean here is I'm planning on having 1 week out of every month for 4 months. It comes to $4,200 per week, but I'm taking into consideration that BitShares might go down, so I'm asking for 6 to 7K for a week, and then I'll give back whatever I get, whatever I don't spend. But what I'm going to do is we're going to have 1 week out of every month that we will put up this CoinMarketCap ad, and we'll have the website up all the time with the form. The form will go to my email, and I'll be able to assess how many worker proposals we get when we're advertising, as opposed to on CoinMarketCap, as opposed to how many worker proposals we get when we are not. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this on Steemit. I'm going to post a little bit about it and get a discussion going this week. But I think it's really important that we start figuring out if it's valuable to put ads on CoinMarketCap. I think it is, but we can fight about it or not. But I would prefer to find out how valuable it is, and we can kind of go from there as a discussion in the future. So if you guys are interested in supporting this, I would love if you guys would consider that. I haven't put it in yet. We're going to have it put in, though, probably this week. So with that said, I hope you guys will support that. And I also want to let you know that I'm going to be more than willing to be a proxy for anybody who wants somebody who shows up here and can be a proxy at any time. However, I also urge you guys to consider CM Steem and Talkinator, and anybody who's listening, if you have these tokens, consider taking the time to proxy to these people. If you don't have, especially if you're into all kinds of cryptos and you don't have the time to decide for yourself, these people are going to keep coming on here. They've proven it, and they're going to keep showing that they care about the ecosystem. They're going to talk about valid, interesting subject matter that anybody who holds these tokens should know about. So why not give them the ability to make the decisions? Because you can account for what they're doing pretty easily without ever even getting on the internet, other than to just, listen to or getting onto forums and searching through things. Just having another tool for us in our toolbox is another form of media like what we're doing here. And I want to thank everybody who joined this week and who has been supporting us, because it's hard to do things alone, but you're never really alone when you have a whole community who helps. So I do really want to thank all of you. And for those of you who joined up and you're working on DSIPs, you're working on trying to get worker proposals done, or any number of things in the crypto ecosystem, let me know in this BitShares Hangout if you're helping BitShares. And I'll try to reward you. I have the ability to do so now because of chain synergy, which we'll get into later. But I'm glad that I can, and I appreciate all of you, because Without you guys, we wouldn't have what we have. So we'll see you guys next week. Keep on trucking. Find valuable golden nuggets out in crypto land and bring them back to BitShares so they can work with us and to build more cool things. See you next week.